I can't say much, but I wanted to try coming up with a story, and I hope you'll listen to it wholeheartedly. And it's probably something that reflects me, as you know, many stories do. They reflect the writer. And I hate it, but here I go. I'm just winging it, by the way. So, she was a lonely old witch. She lived by the riverside, and the only days she ever saw were bright sunny ones. She was convinced she was content with her life, her tiny, comfortable house, the stove that keeps her warm during the winter, and the welcoming animals that come trotting along during spring. She was convinced that everything was okay. What more could she ask for? But one day, a little frog hopped up on her windowsill and he asked the old lady, well, not exactly old, she's like maybe 30ish, so she asked the witch, or whatever she is. In my mind, I imagine her as a witch, with warts and gloomy, yet she's happy. Anywho, so the frog asked her what she was doing here. The lady laughed it off as though it was the most absurd question of the world. But after the frog left, she thought about it, and she thought about her purpose and her reason for being there. The next day, she's out picking cherries from a cherry bush. It was a good season for cherries. They were bright red and perfectly ripe, and the lady's favorite food were cherries. And then a butterfly lands on her hand. Nibbling at the cherry, it asked, Nibbling at the cherry, it asked, why is that your favorite food? You see, the old witch didn't have any memories pertaining to her childhood, but she was an optimistic character and never really wondered what any of this was meant for. She just lived through it, and it was perfectly fine. It was perfectly happy. She didn't need anybody else in her life but her house and that stove and the winters and springs that come along, because those were her favorite seasons. She went home and thought about the two questions that the butterfly and the frog asked her, and suddenly she started crying. She didn't know anymore how such simple questions could alter her entire perspective and in turn ruin her and break her down. And obviously nobody calls for such horrid happenings, yet they happen. Shit happens. And the witch was baffled at the flowing water from her eyes, as from as long as she can remember, at the age of 12, she hadn't been sad at all. The only emotion she knew was happiness. Whether it was a curse placed upon her or whether it was reality playing a trick on her mind, she woke up the next day ready to collect water for breakfast, to brew up some tea and eat those cherries from yesterday. The river was abundant with bright sparkling water today, and fish were getting nowhere swimming upstream, but yet they still did so. And suddenly, staring at the fish trying so hard to do something they'll never succeed at, she jumped into the river and killed herself. The end. I hope that was a good story. God, I don't want to send this to you. I'll listen to it first.